Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest version of the Marketo user group, and also the Charlotte Digital Marketing Group, and also our Marketo Engage Facebook channel. However it is that you're watching this particular session, I want you to know that you're welcome, and you're welcome to be here. You're welcome to participate. We love having you. We love being able to talk a little bit about marketing technology, whatever marketing technology you happen to be using. My name is Michael Tucker. Again, I'm founder of Conversion Store. We're a marketing technology agency, a consultancy, and we work with all sorts of different Marketo customers that are mid-sized customers. And today we're going to be talking about this new sender reputation rules that are coming into play with Google and Yahoo being able to make these changes and starting to evaluate all of the different sends that you're sending out. We thought it would be a good idea to be able to talk a little bit about what all these rules mean without going into all of the DNS, the technical issues that you see inside of your Marketo instance, inside of your domain name server. Because it's not really about your Marketo instance at all. It's really about your DNS servers and how you make those compliant with the new rules. So we want to be able to talk a little bit about how do you work in your DNS server. Most marketers don't deal with this. You only deal with it once, and then that's it. We see it quite a bit. And it's because we do a lot of implementations of brand new Marketo instances. And it's because we work with companies that are usually working with multiple brands. Think private equity companies and mergers and acquisitions and migrations. Um, and because I have that in my background, it's an area that I've been working in a lot. So very comfortable talking about it, but I thought we would be good to use to build some resources to be able to explain what these new rules are. So today we're going to be diving into this. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them inside of the chat with whatever platform you're in. So if you're in Facebook or you're in Twitter, or X, excuse me, or you're on this new streaming channel that we're using, be able to put them in. We'll take your questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll dive right into this, and we'll explain it in plain English. So you don't need to be a network engineer. You don't need to go into all the details in order to be able to understand some of the topics that we're talking about here. Now, that being said, we're not going into all of the details behind your DNS record and your zone files. And there'll be some of you that are really comfortable with this topic and will probably kind of look at this and go, well, wait, you're not answering this part of of how to implement this. And that's not what this is about. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the people that are working in companies that are big enough to own Marketo are usually not the marketers that are making those domain name changes. It's your IT department. And so just keep that in mind. That's what this is all about is how do we empower you, the marketing technology professional, to be able to come to your IT department and have better conversations with them so that you have all the knowledge you need to answer any questions that they have. And they're going to have questions, and they should have questions because your domain name impacts so many different parts of your business. Not just marketing, it's HR, it's IT, it's finance, it's investor relations, you name it, it's your corporate leadership. Every part of your business is now touched by your domain name. So getting that domain name blocked by a Google and Yahoo is big trouble for your company. So we wanted to make sure that we have this in place right now. Your messages, if you're sending over 5,000 emails a day, to Google or Yahoo are going to be scrutinized by these two platforms. So make sure you've got this in place. If you don't have it already, cancel all of your email campaigns until you get this fixed. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do here. If you have any questions about this outside of here, I want you to feel free to send me an email or a LinkedIn message. Michael at conversionstore.com is my email address, or you can just call me directly if you want to too. It's 704-469-5137. And if you hit extension 1, that'll go to me or to anybody else who's kind of working on marketing automation projects here at Conversion Store. So without that, I will, get going here on the presentation here. Let me just switch screens for a minute, and we'll dive into this right now. Okay, everybody. So today's presentation is all around understanding the new sender reputation rules from Google and from Yahoo, but doing it in plain English. And so just a little bit of backdrop here. February 2024, Google and Yahoo, two of the biggest email providers that are out there for people that are looking for email accounts, made an announcement, and they basically said, starting February 2024, we're monitoring all email from bulk senders, and we're going to make sure that you add an extra set of authentication protocols and an extra layer of unsubscribe policies, basically. So we want to make sure if you send out more than 5,000 emails a day, uh, to our email servers, we're going to be monitoring. If we see a large number of unsubscribes, we're just going to block everything that comes from your domain name. Huge implications for those of us who are in email marketing. You really need to make sure that you're not being blocked. You're not blocking your entire domain name. But the real challenge from an email marketer's perspective is, okay, well, what do I have to do to be able to comply with the rules? And when you dive into it, you wind up reaching a whole series of different acronyms: DMARC, SPF, IP4, MX records, soft bounces, hard bounces, MX records, SOA records, DNS zones. And this isn't something that most people will dive into in marketing. Usually you're told in the Marketo document, there's one article that kind of covers it. And it basically says, here's the information, give this to your IT department and let them handle it. And there's a pretty good reason for that too. It's because in most enterprise companies that are usually Marketo's user base, you want to be able to have an IT department in charge of this because it's so ubiquitous across the company's technology, not just marketing technology, but all of their technology, right? Everybody that works in a company these days has an email address. Well, what you do as the email marketer with that domain name affects everybody who is on that email address. So, really important that we're kind of conscientious about how we're handling that domain name reputation, um, so that we're not blocking the entire company and everybody that needs the domain name for emails. And when we think about this from a marketer's perspective, right, it's helpful to kind of zoom out and not think about it in all these technical terms. And so when we just think about the process a little bit about what's going on when we send out an email campaign, there's really four elements that are involved in that. So you, the marketer, are crafting out your message, working on trying to figure out, okay, what is compelling for the audience that I'm trying to send to match the narrative of my product or service offering, and how am I moving that person through the next phase of the customer journey. To do that, you're using an email tool. Now, in our case, we're usually talking about Marketo. Now, I know there's people in this audience that are not Marketo users, and so just rest assured that this is the similar, parallel, if not the same process. If you're using other tools, if you're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or you're using ActiveCampaign, or even if you're using something like a Mailchimp or a Constant Contact, they still go through that same process. And they're sending to email service providers. So your email, your email provider is going to be somebody like a Gmail or a Yahoo. But it could also be all of the different email servers that you see a company run, like Microsoft Exchange Server. And there are other email providers that are out there as well too, but you just want to be cognizant that they're going through their own vetting process before they're delivering email to the actual audience that you want to be able to receive. Okay, well, all of this is really kind of conceptual and sort of abstract language, but really when you think about it in terms of actual real world examples, so you are the marketing operations manager, the marketing automation manager, or a campaign operations manager is probably more likely. You're using Marketo, you're sending to Yahoo, and you're trying to reach the person who's your audience. So maybe it's the vice president, maybe it's somebody else on the buying committee if you're talking about B2B type of an offer. Um, and if you think about this, it kind of looks a lot like the way that things used to be before digital. And that's a really helpful way if you're trying to kind of put together all of these technical elements behind these new spam recommendations. To think about this, don't think about it necessarily like the digital method, right? Email is called email because it was easy for people to introduce the concept to people about sending in a message from one person to another. right? It didn't have to be called email, but it was a great name to be able to use because it helped people to understand really quickly, okay, I'm sending an electronic message, an electronic piece of mail from a sender to receiver, just like we thought about before. And, over the years, it's gotten a little bit more complicated about what you can do with it. But essentially, that process is the same, right? You're still sending to all of these different mailboxes. All of these different mailboxes have different receivers that are opening them and looking into the message, to the mail, and deciding what they want to open and what they want to throw away. And so, it's the same process that Yahoo and Gmail are going through right now and saying, well, what do I want to open and what do I want to throw away? So let's take this analogy and kind of use that to compare it with the sender reputation process that we're being asked to go through here now. And so really, if you think about the old days, right, you're crafting a message inside of your office space. You're sending the message out to a mail carrier. Now, and admittedly, and having done this in the earlier part of my marketing career, you know, these larger mail drops are really done by mail houses, right? So they have the experience of being able to do a print run, being able to do variable print, and as the technology kind of went along, and then doing the packaging to make sure that they drop that to the U.S. Postal Service here in the United States, or Canada Post in Canada, or whoever the letter carriers are from that sender, to be able to then go ahead and send it out to your final destination. Now, we're hoping that they're sending it to the right location and that the address that we put in the delivery address is where the email is actually going to. We're also hoping, when you're doing direct mail back in the day, that the person would actually see the envelope and want to open it up and want to read the message. And that was one of the biggest challenges as a marketer for direct mail: is how do I craft my envelope? How do I craft my message so that it's appealing? The digital version of that, as you all know, is okay. Well, what do we put in our subject line? What do we put in our byline or description line? What do we put in the from address? What do we put in the from name? That's sort of the equivalent. You're trying to get an open. Well, same thing what we had with direct mail, right? How do you get people to open the envelope? So when you think about this from the sender's perspective, and we drill into that, right, they're using a Marketo or another email marketing tool, and they're going through the same process. They're composing the message, they're adding an envelope, they're adding paid postage, and then they're waiting for it to ship through a mail drop. But you notice that all of those things kind of conform together. Like, an envelope is always going to have the delivery address in the center, the return address in the top left, and the postage in the top right. And so there's a little bit of variation in that with direct mail and some of the different sending permits that you have, but generally they all still fall into that standard. So the next thing that you look at here is you say, well, okay, who is the mailman? What's their role in this? Well, they're a lot like the email sending platform itself. Like, after you press send on one of your email campaigns, it doesn't just magically go out. There's a whole process that Marketo and all of the other platforms have to go through to make sure that their message is formatted correctly and that it has all of the different elements that allow it to be sent properly throughout the internet to go to the right location. So, back in the old days, we'd call this like FidoNet, and it would have all these different routing information before the World Wide Web became a thing. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but the underlying process is still the same. And so all of these tools still go through this process of going through and doing all of these validation methods so that the person that receives it, the Gmails and the Yahoos of the world, know that it's an authenticated email address and it came from this person. And so if you want to think about that as an example, the example of that in direct mail is okay, you're putting a postage stamp on. Well, you want to make sure that the postage stamp is actually a legitimate postage stamp and not a fraudulent postage stamp, or that the actual when they go to run it through and they have the postmark, so they'll have like a stamp that they'll put on top of your paid postage stamp to say, okay, this one has been sent out, and here's the location. Kind of lets them know, okay, this was paid, and we are going to go ahead and deliver this envelope, this direct mail message. The mailbox afterwards is really, okay, so you're sending this and you're putting placement inside of this person's mailbox. And the real plus on this was that it's going directly into a spot where they have to touch it. The person has to be able to see it. In a lot of ways, your email inbox is kind of the same way, right? You're not going to ignore your inbox in perpetuity. You're going to look at it at some point, for whatever job it is you have, or even in your personal life, because you need to know, is an important message coming in there from, let's say, a bill or an invoice, or that latest piece of message I want to be able to receive, right? So it's such an integral part of our lives that you're always going to have people that are taking a look at it. Now, one of the things that I think is a little bit different, since anti-spam technology has really come to play, is you think of that as like your executive assistant, right? And probably the most noticeable example of that was when Gmail put in these social filters and the spam filter tabs that you see inside of your Gmail inbox, to be able to kind of check and make sure, okay, well, all this spam message that we're getting isn't going to flood the inbox, and that people still can make tangible use out of the inbox. Well, as I wouldn't say the marketers, but email senders are becoming more and more evolved to try and work around all of these spam methods and these anti-spam methods. It's getting harder and harder for Gmail and Yahoo to be able to tell what's a legitimate message and which one isn't. And so a question that kind of comes up is, well, why do we, how do we know, right? Like, if I get an envelope here, and this envelope has nice branding on it, and it has offering messages to it, I can pretty quickly surmise, okay, these are probably going to be promotional offers. And then my next question when I look at these envelopes is, well, do I know what Amica Insurance and Cons Home Furnishings are? Like, does that mean anything to me as a brand? And if you think about that and overlay your customer journey on it, it really helps you to decide, well, is this the right method to be able to do? People are always saying, cold email is effective here and not effective there. Well, it's the same thing with direct mail. If you don't have a prior relationship with Cons Home Furnishings and Amica Insurance, are you really going to open up these envelopes, or are you just going to say, well, this is a promotional offer, I don't know what these companies are and I don't really care, I'm going to just rip them up and throw them away without even looking at them? That's possible. The other way of looking at that is it helps the legitimate senders. So I live in the Carolinas in the United States, and Duke Energy is our energy utility company. I'm not going to throw away this envelope, I because I know Duke Energy. And likewise, there are offers that are in place where they're not even looking at opening up the envelope at all. They just want you to be able to kind of get an impression, to be able to make some sort of awareness. And you probably have seen this in some of your email marketing campaigns as well too, right? How many oft times have you sent more of those cold emails? I think in a way you could kind of argue that cold email kind of exists in order to be able to create those impressions with just the subject lines, to start to get people to be familiar with your brand. I don't know, whether I would necessarily recommend doing that, especially with your primary domain name, because of the this rule that we're talking about here right now, and the ability to get spam blocked. But it's important to kind of look at that and say, well, that is an impression. It's one of those, if you think of Robert Ogilvy and the seven touches in order to be able to create a brand impression, which is higher now than when he wrote his original book on advertising. It's the same sort of a concept here, as you're trying to get these impressions to be able to get people aware and engaged with your brand. But it kind of detracts from the inbox altogether, and you're left with the question, well, what do I deliver at the end of the day, right? If I'm Gmail and Yahoo, how do I know what's really spam or what they're interested in? Like, I'm not interested in the insurance companies that were here before, but I am interested in the utility company. Well, they're all businesses. They're all sending messages. They're all using the same envelopes. They all have the same postage permits that are on them. How do I know, right? So this is kind of the real crux behind why these new spam compliance policies are in place now, and they're being enforced this year. So why do you need to listen to me about this, right? Like, why what do we have as a background in this? Well, Just to give you a little bit of an introduction here, again, my name is Michael Tucker, and my company, Conversion Store, has we've been working on Marketo instances since 2016. And we're working with email marketing personally since 2006. Now, last year, 2023, I was actually on the committee that helped to write the questions for the Adobe Certified Expert exam for Marketo Engage. And so I actually have a designation as a certified subject matter expert above and beyond the Adobe Certified Expert, the Marketo Certified Expert designations you've seen. And part of my interest in this is that, education wise, my background was in marketing and sales, but before that, my focus was really in management information systems. And so a long time ago, before the first .com meltdown, my goal was really working on information technology management and handling a lot of the kind of server architecture that we're talking about today. So all these DNS servers, these things that look incredibly complicated with all the acronyms at the beginning, that was a large part of my world really growing up, and I really found that to be really enjoyable and interesting. And I can understand why somebody might not, which is part of the reason why we're putting together this presentation. And since we've been doing this, we've been helping large companies. So, I've worked with Fortune 50 companies. I've worked with, Microsoft being the largest of them. But a lot of our work at Conversion Store is really on medium-sized businesses that aren't the Fortune 50, the ones that have maybe one, two, three people inside of their digital marketing departments, or maybe, it's just a department of one that has Marketo, needs the power of Marketo, but is struggling to be able to use the power of Marketo. And especially projects that have been areas that we have specifically have been focusing on are areas where you're selling your product or service through multiple networks. So retailer dealerships is a good example of that. And distributors, right? Part of the reason why I've been running the manufacturing Marketo user group since 2017 is because, that's an area that rarely goes directly to consumer. It's changing a little bit nowadays, but by and large, they have some sort of an intermediary in between. And one of the big things behind that is all of those intermediaries usually have their own domains, they have their own brands. So when you're handling marketing, you have to be cognizant of, okay, here are some of the intermediaries that you have to work with. And so one of the things that comes up oftentimes is we're working with private equity companies that are trying to be able to to buy and merge different other companies, and being able to kind of utilize Marketo to be able to incorporate that across the board for all of the different brands that they're buying. So one of the pieces that we put together with that, just to give you a bit of a background, right? Like you can watch this presentation, and this will give you a good understanding of the domain name from a simplified perspective. But once you end this session and you go back into your working lives, invariably you're going to wind up with a question that'll come in from your IT department. So they'll say, okay, well, you want to make some changes to our domain name. Our domain name is used throughout the company, and it's really important. So we're going to be cautious before we implement any of these changes, Mr. or Mrs. Marketer. Tell me a little bit about what that is. And I've seen many a marketer kind of go deer in the headlights and sort of freeze up because they don't know that. And they ask us to come back in and kind of meet with them and sit in these conversations to help explain to the IT department. And happy to do that, by the way. But I thought it would be useful for you to have a bit of a takeaway guide. And so we wrote the Digital Marketer's Guide to Domain Names. And really what this is designed to do, it won't give you an expertise in everything domain names, but it will give you enough information to be able to understand and take that with your marketing department, and be able to have a nice conversation with your IT department with a more educated tone of voice and a more educated perspective to be able to have a good two-way communication with these teams, because you really are building up a relationship with your IT department in much the same way that you are with your sales department and other areas of your company. And so this talks a little bit about why you need to care about domain names, and really gives you just kind of an overview so that you don't get lost in the mumble jumble of all of the acronyms that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. Now, if you want that, you can see here we have, just set up a link quickly. It's bit.ly/digital marketer guides. And we've just got all of that separated by underscores instead of spaces. So feel free to go in there. It's bit.ly/digital marketer guide. And you're welcome to read that and then take that with you as you kind of work through those. So let me give you an example of one of the instances where we had built this out, and we worked with a lot of different domain names for this one company. It really was a private equity firm. What they're doing is they were buying the majority of a fractured market in the automotive space. So there was no one market, no one player in the market that had, I think it was more than 3 or 5% of the market share, and they were trying to buy 30% of it to be able to get, the benefits that you get from having market control over that market. And so they're buying 8 different businesses. Now, some of these businesses had well established regional and national dealership networks. And one of the challenges on that is that those dealership networks have their own branding, they have their own websites, they have their own, location basically, and all of their sales function were unique to the different company. And so this was part of a larger implementation that the PE firm wanted to build out. So they're going to build a Marketo instance to handle digital marketing. They're going to handle a Salesforce instance to handle the CRM, and they're working on a different content management system to build kind of a cookie cutter landing page or a microsite, if you will, for each of these locations. And they're spread all throughout the U.S. Now, you can imagine a big challenge with that is that because each of the brands are there, we need one market, and you can't have 103 different marketing automation platforms. It'd be impossible to be able to manage without having a marketing manager at every location. And it really negates all the economies of scale that you'd get there. But it's important that, basically what had to happen is we went in and tied together 103 different domain names into this one Marketo instance, and built it so that it was scalable, so that an individual marketing manager could handle all of the different domain names and then run regional campaigns that were personalized to that specific location. Was a great project. We had 8 different workspaces because some of the businesses were direct competitors with other businesses. So we wanted to make sure that the marketing teams in company A were not allowed to see the marketing efforts that were happening in company B for, antitrust and uh, monopoly reasons, basically, right? And so that was all in place to help ensure that could never happen. And we went through, and so you're talking in this presentation about, going through and fixing one domain name. We were doing that for over 100 different domain names, and tying it into one Marketo instance. So really important that if we wanted to kind of represent the brand identity and some of the personalization that you see here, but at the same point in time, we also had to keep in mind all of the sender reputation across the entire Marketo instance, so that, if one dealership was spamming some of its customers or visitors, that we were able to kind of keep an eye on that and make sure that it didn't sully the reputation of the entire Marketo instance, would have affected the entire network. So we had some things that were built in place to be able to kind of check against that. But it's important to kind of understand that at the end of the day, this helps you to scale. Like, this is what allows you to be able to get a lower cost of production, lower cost of operations for this company. But it also allowed them to take advantage of the overall market share to be able to produce one specific marketing campaign and then repurpose that across, over 100 different locations, and do that at a marginal cost because everything was pre-built, basically, right? We had everything tokenized using Marketo tokens in order to be able to send that out. So it's a big win for the company to be able to do something like this. And, we'll have a case study out about that on our website at conversionstore.com later on. But, just something to kind of give you a background about why we've worked in these domain names so much. So why is Google and Yahoo doing this is the other piece. Well, it's understand, we talked a little bit about spam at the beginning of this, and it's becoming more pervasive. So recent Google article, as they were announcing this, these new rules, are saying, listen, we have 15 billion unwanted messages that come through Gmail every day. I can't even imagine that. I mean, it makes sense why they have so much infrastructure to be able to support that, but the cost of that, just from processing and storage, is a lot. It's immense. I can see why they would want to cut this down. And we care about it too as marketers, and they care about it as well too, is because we don't want them to ignore their inbox if it's going to be flooded with spam. That leads to attrition inside of Gmail. It means that people won't want to use their Gmail, but it also makes it harder for us as marketers to get the messages that really matter to kind of come through. And the other piece of this legislation, so a couple of things about it, right, is you're adding an extra layer of authentication. You also have to be really cognizant about your unsubscribes and that you're actually honoring when somebody says that they want to unsubscribe. You've got to do it within 2 days. It's usually not a problem using Marketo's standard methods, but when you go back to this example here with 103 domain names, that's 103 different locations that would be doing unsubscribes. If somebody unsubscribes from the location in Des Moines, we want to make sure that they don't unsubscribe from Chicago or Peoria or anywhere else. That exists as well too. So you don't necessarily use Marketo's standard unsubscribe rules, and that's okay for that particular type of circumstance. But you have to build this in place to be able to say, okay, well, that we might not use Marketo's unsubscribe capabilities, but we still have to be able to honor this 2-day unsubscribes, or we're going to be in big trouble with our domain name reputation. And the other piece of that is to keep our unsubscribes at a lower level. So it has to be below 0.2% within a given month. And so, they'll allow you to have a mulligan here or there, but you really don't want to be doing that, for a large number of campaigns over a given month, because that'll set off the flags for you. So what do they mean exactly to you? And it might have a really big impact. It might not have that big of an impact on you. It kind of depends on a couple of things. Depends on what the audience that you're sending to is. What type of a business are you? Are you a business to business? Are you business to consumer? Are you business to governments? Are you nonprofit entity? So it really varies. It's designed to apply for people that are sending 5,000 emails. I'm sorry, that should say daily emails, not monthly. We'll change that. So if you're under that amount, you probably won't have the type of scrutiny to get blacklisted. You will still have deliverability problems. So they want you to have an SPF, a DMARC, and a DKIM record. Okay, those are all a bunch of acronyms. What the heck does that mean? And that's really what we're going to present in the rest of this presentation, is just to kind of explain that in plain English. But you still want to do it. It's not difficult to do, really, in terms of being time consuming. But you want to be able to do it so that you still are going to have deliverability at a decent level. You won't be penalized for that. It's applying to personal addresses. Now, this is for the time being. Um, these rules are really going to go into full force and full compliance in June of 2024. And so at that point, we'll see what happens, right? But it's likely that the trend on this, because they're getting the ball rolling on on these checks, that these are going to wind up being put into compliance for some of the non-personal, the corporate, the business addresses as well too. So you won't see this on Google for Google Workspaces, for corporate domains, but a lot of those corporate IT managers also have their own independent tools that will check your email. So like Barracuda, I think in Jupyter Networks, will have different routers that will actually sit, or email security tools that will sit inside of a company's IT network, that'll go through all of your emails and click on all the links and check to see whether to subscribe or unsubscribe them anyway. And so it's important to kind of understand that right now it's only really to these personal addresses. It's probably not going to stay that way. Now, the other thing that you could say as a business to business marketer, and because of Marketo's nature in the B2B marketing space, we get a lot of people that argue that, well, these generic emails don't really get used as much for the type of marketing that we're doing. We're really focusing on people that are in businesses. And so if they give us a Gmail or a Yahoo address, we're not going to take that as seriously. Okay, that might be true. And you might be able to make an argument for that. The thing that we have seen through the years of doing this is that oftentimes most people will have a Gmail and a Yahoo address just for like gated content to be able to make sure that they're not inundated with spam. It's a way to kind of help mitigate that. If you're one of those people, put them in the comments. I'd love to kind of understand, do you have a Gmail or a Yahoo account that you use to kind of give to people when you're signing up for something that's promotional, where you think you're going to be on a promotional list? I know I do. And so, if you look at that in terms of your customer journey and your funnel, that those are really kind of top of funnel buyers, right? They might be really good buyers. They're just putting in that address at the beginning of the relationship to be able to kind of get a little bit of better understanding about you and what you're offering of value as a marketer before they go ahead and give you a corporate address. So I wouldn't necessarily advise that you just blanket throw those out altogether, and anybody who sends a Gmail and a Yahoo. Although you can do that, I mean, at a certain point in the process, we will, kind of encourage people to give us a corporate email address, and they usually will do that anyway for the fact that they probably aren't looking at their Gmail and Yahoo address. It's just a way for them to be able to kind of mitigate the inbox that they do have. All right, so let's dive into the actual protocols themselves and kind of what they mean. So the SPF is really, we like to think about that as the envelope. It stands for Sender Policy Framework. And really, it's a way to be able to understand by just quickly analyzing a TXT entry inside of the domain name. Again, getting really technical there, but don't worry about that. But basically, it's just a text entry that kind of says, "Hey, what are all of the email applications that this company owns that are going to be sending from this particular domain name?" So if I'm sending from Duke Energy and I'm using Marketo, I want to be able to make sure that I send a note in my Duke Energy domain name that says, okay, Marketo is actually a tool that we use. And if you think about that, that's kind of like this return address that you see on the envelope. So why do we have the analogy of the envelope? Well, when you look at an envelope, part of the reason why I know it's Duke Energy and it's not Amica Insurance is that I'm now looking at the from address and I'm seeing, okay, it's got the Duke Energy, it's got an address, it's got a Duke Energy logo on it, and it has a permit that actually shows that this was paid, um, a paid piece of first class mail, and all of that logo and that information checks out. If I go to their homepage at Duke Energy, I can see that the logo on my Duke Energy homepage matches the logo that's on my return address of the envelope. So it's a pretty good sign that this envelope is in fact coming in from Duke Energy, and they're actually sending me a legitimate piece of mail. Better open it up. The next piece that we're going to talk about is DKIM. And so DKIM is the way I would think about DKIM is it's like sending a really encoded password, pass catchphrase, like basically just a way to be able to kind of put a secret password in that allows you to basically get access. So think of it like maybe like a combination lock, or like this tool over here. Does anybody know what this is? Put in the comments if you know what this is. This is the Enigma machine that was used during World War II by the Germans to be able to send encrypted messages by radio frequency, basically in the Atlantic during World War II from the U-boats and the rest of the German Navy. And so really, one of the big keys about winning World War II was that the Allies were able to kind of capture one of these devices and use them to be able to decrypt these Enigma machines. In fact, this was one of the first projects that led to modern computing as we know it today. Is was being able to build the decryption for the Enigma machine. Why does that matter compared to DKIM? So what's happening in DKIM is each email application that you use. So in Marketo, you remember there's a area of Marketo that allows you to basically say, okay, I'm going to create a DKIM key. It's a big long password. It's a big giant jumble of characters that's included. And basically what you're doing is you're taking that giant message and you're saving that to your domain name. So your domain name is always going to be associated. So at conversionstore.com, we have a DKIM for every single email application that we're sending out, where we're sending out messages to. And what that is that's kind of like the decoder ring. If you think about the old cereal boxes that you used to get, where somebody would write down this encrypted message. And part of why you go back to Marketo to verify that DKIM is actually sitting on the domain name is once you do that, then Marketo is going to say, okay, great. We have a domain name that is verified with our DKIM encryption code. And so because of that, we're going to send another private inside of every email before it goes out. We're going to send kind of an attached encrypted message that will come with the email. Now you never see this; it's buried inside of the email headings of every email that you see. You could go in and take a look at it in Yahoo or in Outlook if you wanted to be able to do that in the properties of an email. But it wouldn't mean a lot. And it only really means anything to the email providers because what happens is when they get that message, they say, okay, well, there's a DKIM authentication signature that's attached to it. Let me go to the website for the from sender that's in this, that's sending me this email and grab the decoder. And I'm going to apply this to this message that's being attached to my email. After I decode the message, does it make sense? Is what Gmail and Yahoo are going to say. Now, if the answer is yes, and okay, well, we know that the coding factor is probably authentic, we're going to go ahead and send the email through. But if it's not, and it winds up being a bunch of jumble, then we know, okay, well, this email that we're getting really doesn't match the decoding method that we see on the domain name. It's probably fraudulent. We're gonna block it or quarantine it, and we probably will put a note that we should be suspicious of anything that comes in from the sender, from this domain name, because we've already seen it once. It might happen again. So it's really, that's really what's happening with this DKIM. Now, the next question that comes up is, well, what happens if I fail DKIM? What do I do if I'm Google or I'm Yahoo and I say, well, what do I do now? So that's really where DMARC is. Now, this is the new piece of authentication that is necessary now. It used to be optional. So if you set up your Marketo instance with us at Conversion Store, we would have built out a DMARC for you. But you can check, and we actually built a checker into our like a free checker if you're a Marketo user on our website at conversionstore.com for this, just to make sure, okay, that we have this DMARC on your domain name. And what this is basically saying, okay, well, what are the instructions if I fail DKIM? What do I do now with my DMARC? Or what do I do with that message? Do I send it back to my IT department? Do I quarantine the entire domain name? How rigorously should I apply this policy? And so the kind of plain English version of that is kind of the forwarding address that you give to the post office. So if you think about a scenario where maybe you've had a mailing address for so many years, you move. And you either go to another company or your company moves to a different location. What do I do with that address now or that piece of mail? Do I throw it away? Do I shred it? What do I do if I'm in the post office afterwards, right? And so this is really what's doing. It's kind of like that yellow tag that you see here as you're saying, okay, well, where do I send it to now? And so really, This gets added, and this is, you if you put an address back and says, well, send a notification to our IT department, the email server will do that. And you can actually buy DMARC monitoring tools that allow you to be able to kind of monitor these and be able to report back to your IT department so they can see from all of the different sources, technologies that they use in their company. What do I do with these DMARC methods? This is really the one to keep an eye on. So this one was optional. It's now required. So this is the new piece when you're thinking of these new sender reputation capabilities. You really want to keep an eye on this one. And then the last piece of this that we'll really kind of get into is really about the unsubscribe rules. All right. So, you probably see in the footer of your email now that you have to have some sort of an unsubscribe. And in fact, in Marketo, if you don't have a tag, a token that's at the bottom of your or somewhere in your message that says system.unsubscribe link, Marketo will place one manually underneath your email, whatever that happens to be, in plain text, and will just drive you to, well, whatever is in your admin panel. But usually it's their default landing page, which is this horrible looking gray landing page that just says, what's your email address so we can unsubscribe you. That's not really good enough now. Now you need to have it so that it's a one-click unsubscribe with these new preferences. So a preference center, great to have it. Good to give people the ability and the option to be able to choose what preferences that they want. You can have that, but you also have to have this one unsubscribe that's here in the footer, right? It's not enough to just say, okay, here's a contact information or privacy policy. You have to have a one-click unsubscribe. So you need to go back in, take a look at your design studio, your email templates, and make sure that that's the case. If it's not, let us know. We work with email templates, and we're happy to be able to make updates with that. And one of the things that we do in our email templates is they're not really the cookie cutter ones. Like there's a lot of places where you can go out and say, well, if you give us $2,000, we'll give you access to our cookie cutter template that has every kind of cookie cutter shape that you can think of. I really I'm under the strong opinion and the strong axiom in our company that you know marketing needs to be a little bit more personalized than that. A cookie cutter is great if you want to look like everybody else in your industry. If you look like everybody else in your industry, then you're a commodity. And the only way that you can differentiate yourself then is really on price. So maybe that's a little bit hard and fast, and there's probably some exceptions to that. But you really should look at, trying to customize that a little bit to be able to provide a better brand experience to kind of differentiate yourself. The other piece on this is, if you do have a preference center, make sure that you have that 2-day service level agreement in there so that you're being added and removed from the service from your subscription lists within that period of time. Again, usually not a problem in Marketo instances, but there are instances where we're talking about before, especially with multiple brands and lines of business, where you really need to be able to customize your Marketo instance so that it doesn't do that. And one of the great things about Marketo specifically is that you have that ability without having to buy a second or a third or a 14th Marketo instance in order to be able to do that. You can do it all within one. All right, so that's it in a nutshell. Uh, and you see in the point here, right, we built a checker on conversionstore.com, and it's right at the halfway down our homepage. There's a link to it, and it's in a big red outline box that basically says, give us your domain name and your contact information. We'll go through a check, and within 48 hours, we'll tell you, you know, whether your domain name meets the new sender requirements. We'll look at it and we'll say, hey, do you have an SPF? Do you have a DMARC? Do you have a DKIM record? And has it been blacklisted already? Right? Maybe you've already gone through this process and you're already fighting with the email providers to be able to try and unblock your address. That is not easy to do, by the way, to get your domain name unblocked. So highly recommend that you check this before you wind up in that spot, just so that you don't have any more pain later on. Nobody wants to have to go through the process of rebranding. Nobody wants to have to go through the process of trying to repair or change your domain name altogether. And I've seen it happen in a couple of times in my career. before I got into marketing, actually, and it's not fun. A lot of pain for those companies that are going through it. Now, the other thing, this won't negate your need for a technical resource to answer questions on your domain name, right? You still are going to need it. Your IT department has a right, and they really should be kind of questioning why you're asking for changes to this, just because it has such an impact across their entire company. So you need to know, you know, who's in charge of your domain name servers, and then they usually know. Usually, you don't know completely as a marketer about all of the different software that requires email access inside of a company. Especially as it gets larger. And the other thing to kind of look at is, well, maybe an easier way to do this is to set up either a subdomain or to use a different top level domain altogether. Instead of going .com, putting like .net or .co or .info or something along those lines, to be able to not to be able to send out email, especially if you're sending cold email, without putting your primary domain name at risk, just because it has such an impact on the rest of your company. So important to kind of look at that. If you have questions on this and you want to be able to talk further about it, we'll open up for a little bit of question and answer during this meeting. But please feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Michael Tucker, Charlotte, North Carolina at Conversion Store. Or you can also go to our a link here that's bit.ly/spam rules 2024, all in lowercase, in underscores instead of spaces, and we'll give you more information about that. And of course, if you want to subscribe to our blog and kind of look at some of the other content that we've produced, we run the Marketo User Group YouTube channel, like the original one, and also have quite a bit of video content in our Marketo Minutes series, which you can see on our website at conversionstore.com, which are just quick 15-20 minute videos that kind of help to understand all of the different ways that you can use Marketo to make money in your marketing campaigns and with your company. So with that, I'll end it there, and we'll open up the session a little bit. We'll go in and kind of do some Q&A and answer some questions, and you guys feel free to interact. I'd love to be able to talk to all of you. And anybody who asks questions, we can invite some of you to join us here on the feed as well, and open up a little discussion. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys for sitting through the session and kind of understanding a little bit about what sort of requirements that Google and Yahoo are going to have here now. We'll ask a couple of questions. There's some really good discussion that some of you had kind of coming into these sessions. So first question that we have came in from Taylor. And he talks a little bit and says, Taylor basically said, can you talk a little bit about BIMI authentication and whether it's value or worth going through that? So what BIMI is basically taking all the requirements that we talked about here, your SPF, your DMARC, your DKIM, and then it's also adding another factor about your logo. And so not every email platform supports this yet, but a lot of the major ones do. That shows that icon that you'll see just to the left of your subject line, to basically kind of make that kind of show up instead of having the acronyms around your domain or your brand, excuse me, actually have the logo. Probably a little bit more impactful if you're in B2C, and especially if you're in areas that are, you have a high degree of security is kind of an issue. So think of like banks, or think of like these utility companies, like Duke Energy probably has one. Although I haven't just checked that off the top of my head, so I'm not entirely sure about that as an example. But it's worth doing. It's not very difficult to be able to do, to do kind of the basic check for that. It does get a little bit more complicated if you're trying to get a verified mark. And so for something like that, you actually have to go ahead and show them that you have a registered trademark on your logo and on your domain name, or excuse me, on your logo and your brand. And so that's a bit of a process that's required. Now, note that is not required for the additional projects that you have going on right now inside of these requirements that we're dealing with this year. So you can meet those requirements. You don't have to have your show them proof of your trademark in order to be able to meet the sender reputation rules that we're seeing here right now in 2024 for the Google and the Yahoo requirements. But definitely good to have. And then one of the great things about that too is it sure helps you to stand out when you're trying to send mail into the inbox of your audience. So from that side of things, from a customer engagement standpoint, that there's a real value for being able to do something like that. So that's one that's worth kind of considering. The other point that Taylor made, and thank you, by the way, Taylor, these are really good comments and really good questions, is about the one-click unsubscribe that's included inside of the headers inside of Marketo. And yeah, that's true. So my point is not really that you want that the one-click headers are not being handled inside of Marketo. My point is specifically for the example I was talking about with 103 domain names, or when you're dealing with multiple brands. There's a lot more companies that are kind of, that's starting to happen a lot more now with Marketo moving up market, that you'll see more than one brand handled by that. And so these subscription rules, these unsubscribe rules, Marketo is a pretty good platform in the standpoint that they're meeting a lot of those requirements in advance. But if you have, as part of your corporate, the way that your company operates, a Marketo instance that's handling across multiple different types of audiences or segmentations, you want to be really conscientious that these rules that are in place are able to kind of handle the unsubscribe so that you're unsubscribing to one brand and not the entire Marketo instance. So from Marketo standpoint, great for them to be able to make sure, okay, if I'm going to unsubscribe, I'd rather unsubscribe from the entire database and try and sort it out afterwards, just in case, so that your entire domain name, your entire IP address of the Marketo instance doesn't get blocked. But if you're running a large scale enterprise, you want to be really conscious just that you're not suddenly running your brand and you're being unsubscribed and your audience lists are dropping dramatically because somebody in an adjacent company or an adjacent line of business under the same umbrella that's using the same Marketo instance has something going on with a campaign, and it's forcing a lot of unsubscribes that are affecting your marketing input. So that's really all I'm saying there is we will go through and kind of work with these, again, when we're dealing with these like private equity firms. They don't necessarily have or want the same rules that are there. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, so if you go to conversionstore.com, you want to fill out any sort of requirements here, we'll follow up with this with a copy of the recording. You can watch this on all the social media channels that we mentioned as well too. If you want to join the Marketo YouTube user group YouTube channel, or the Facebook group is kind of the newer one that we're bringing in. And also they'll be on the Conversion Store website. And we'll also love to get any feedback you have as well too. So if you have, if you want to scan this QR code, this will give you the ability to be able to run that check on your domain. There's no cost to it. It's just, kind of a utility that we basically provide to be able to help give you some insights into this without having to bother your IT department. And the other thing is we'd love to give a review or recommendation and tell a friend or tell your network about the value of this. And if you're finding that enjoyable, then I'd love for you to join us during Adobe Summit. If any of you are or are not going to Adobe Summit, actually, if you're not going to Adobe Summit, I'd love it if you join us for Adobe Summit after hours. And so this will be a session that we're doing at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time in Las Vegas, where me and some of the other friends that I have from the Marketo community, Marketo advocacy over the years, we're going to get together and talk a little bit about the sessions that we found useful, the experiences that we saw from the exhibitors, some of the vendors that are there. Everything that you won't find in the live streams that are on the Adobe website is what we're going to provide in the Adobe Summit after hours section. So there's a link to be able to register for that on our homepage as well too, and happy to be able to see you there, and would love to see you at any other sessions. And so with that, I'm going to end for this session. And thank you again for joining. It was really great seeing all of you here. And looking forward to seeing you again in the Marketo community. And happy marketing.